There's been a lot of requests for getting into this topic about this whole messianic movement, what it means, and I understand some people have made comments that there are many different, just like there are different, I guess you could say, organizations or groups of Christians, different denominations. You got Baptist, Presbyterian, all these different. You also have that same setup in the Messianic Judaism. Messianic Judaism isn't just one set belief system. In fact, I was kind of singled out, believe it or not, because of my view as a Messianic Jew at the time, which I think, Baruch Hashem, I'm out now. But at my time there, my full comprehension and my full understanding of the New Testament was way different than other ones that I knew about, and I couldn't figure out why in the world they would think that based on what I just got through reading. And so you got, just like Christianity, you got all these denominations. So does Messianic Judaism. So just because we only cover one or two views of it doesn't mean that we think that that's all of the belief system in a nutshell. It's just that there's too much to talk about, so we'll catch as much as we can in this particular broadcast. So without any further delay, Rabbi, let's go there.
So let me actually use the point that you raised as a jumping point, as a launching point. Christianity is by far the most variegated religion in the world. There are more versions, there are more Christologies, there are more versions of Christianity, sects of Christianity, that it's not that they have like different customs and traditions, but actually completely different opposing views. There are Christian denominations that most do believe that Jesus was God. Christian denominations believe that Jesus wasn't God. There are Christian denominations, therefore, that believe in a three-part Godhead, a Trinity, and some, like the Unitarians and Christadelphians, that reject that. Some, more than 1 billion Christians, believe that that Rome is the seat of the Pontifex Maximus, and others Protestants who reject that. Now, here's the point: the Messianic movement is highly diverse, not like Christianity is diverse. But rather, because Christianity is so variegated, therefore the Messianic movement is so variegated, because the Messianic movement is a Christian movement. And therefore, what we would expect to find in the Messianic movement is a reflection of variances, of precisely the variances we find among Christians, with the exception of Roman Catholicism. The Roman Catholic Church is technically they didn't really disavow Jewish evangelism. They didn't technically do it, but for all practical purposes, they basically, for the most part, no Roman Catholic, especially in North America, is interested in converting Jews, with the exception of some radical traditionalists, like our good friend Mel Gibson. But these are anomalies and very strange. So we're talking about Protestants. So that's what the Messianic movement is. People may be wondering, well, what is the Messianic movement? How did it develop? 100 years ago, if you would have said Messianic movement to someone, they would go, what is that? Is that like, no one would know what that means, because there was no such thing as the Messianic movement 100 years ago. But as it turns out, after the liberation of Jerusalem in 1967, there were Hebrew Christian societies around, very, very marginal, tiny groups of Jews who had converted to Christianity. That's how people spoke about it. When the founder of Jews for Jesus, his name is Martin Rosen, from the state of Colorado, when he converted, he became a Baptist in the 1950s. He didn't call himself Messianic. You'll never find any time, any place that the founder of Jews for Jesus ever called himself Messianic. He never did. People didn't talk that way. But what happened was in the early 70s, there was something happening. Jerusalem had been liberated only a half a decade earlier. The year 2000 was coming in a little more than a quarter of a century. And these Christians, particularly Christian Zionists, realized that the time was now to bring the Jews to the cross. The Jews had to accept Jesus Christ, this is in their words, as their Messiah. Why? Because they have very unique eschatology, an end-time belief. And that is, they believe that in order for Jesus to make a second coming, a number of things have to take place. And one of them is that the Jews must accept Jesus as their Messiah. And that's based on a verse in Matthew. It's the last verse of chapter 23, verse 39, where Jesus, we are told, says, "I will not return unless you say, 'Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord.'" And because when we read this chapter, Jesus is addressing a Jewish audience, it's actually a very visceral chapter, but this passage would be in red letters in a red letter edition Christian Bible. So therefore, the church understood this to mean that the conversion of the Jews is unique in that it was essential for the Jews to accept Jesus in order for Jesus to trigger the second coming of Jesus. Although it's important to convert other peoples, but the conversion of Jews is vital. And because Israel, the people of Israel, have returned to the land of Israel, which was a part of the thinking of Christian Zionists, of what is really called premillennial dispensationalists, they had to ask themselves a question. It was very clear that the effort to convert the Jews historically had been a failure. I mean, here Christianity went to South America, Central America, and people just converted entire countries, nations just became Christian overnight, in the blink of an eye. Produced the largest Christian countries in the world, like Brazil, the largest Roman Catholic country in the world. The United States, what a Christian country. It is a Christian country, don't fool yourself. It's a very religious country. And if you don't think America is a religious country, spend some time in Western Europe and you'll realize how deeply religious the United States is, how deeply conservative it is compared to anything going on in Europe. So they had a monumental dilemma. Why is it so hard to convert the Jews? Why is it the very people that gave us the Messiah don't accept our version of the Messiah, meaning Jesus? Why don't they? And they actually gathered in western Switzerland in a city called Lausanne. And they came together to figure out to address this conundrum, why has it been so difficult to convert the Jews to Christianity? The effort has been nothing but a catastrophe. I mean, very few Jews were converting. There were a Jew here, a Jew there, but when a Jew converted to Christianity, the church would write a whole book about him. Jews for Jesus, literally, I'm not making this up. They have books they put out of 15 Jews who converted to Christianity. And they tell the story all about them. I remember when one of those came out of the church, left Jews for Jesus, they were so angry at me, they hated my guts because they had to take the book out of publication. But anyways, what happened was they wanted to understand why had the church in the past failed in its effort to convert the Jewish people, and what new effort could be brought about in order to finally so that Jesus can make his second coming. It is an important point to remember that, because Jews don't know this, so for the Jewish listeners, Christians don't believe that they're going to go to heaven for converting a Jew. They don't believe their salvation is connected to that, so I want to make that clear. They think they're going to heaven just for being a Christian, but they believe that the Jews are critical to the second coming of Jesus. This is very important, and therefore there's an imperative to convert the Jews, not only because you're supposed to go to the Jew first, as Paul says in Romans chapter 1, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power unto salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and then to the Greek. And we see that in Matthew chapter 10, verse 34 and 35, where the earliest Christians are told to witness to the Jew first, don't even go into the non-Jewish cities, but only go into the city of the Jewish people. So although that was the case, that's one reason we have a prioritization of the conversion of the Jew in the Christian Bible. It was a failure. I mean, if you look at the letters of Paul, everyone who was becoming Christian, who was joining this new religion, and don't tell me that they didn't become Christian, because Christians in the New Testament, I mean, they use that word. So So they were trying to figure, so they gather in Western Switzerland, moving ahead to the early 70s. There's a coming together, and it was actually called the Lausanne Consultation on Jewish Evangelism. You can go online. It's, I think, Lausanne Consultation on Jewish Evangelism. Just so lcje.net. And you can, it's up there. You can read their notes. You can read their presentation. They wanted to understand why had the church failed to convert the Jews, and what new approach or techniques could be used to finally and effectively bring the Jewish people to the cross. And they found that, in fact, there were some unique problems with converting Jews to Christianity. One of them was that Jewish people, for some reason, associate Christianity with persecution. I don't know how that happened, but somehow it happened. So they emphasized the importance of saying that you're Jewish, we love the Jewish people. A real Christian loves the Jewish people. We love Israel, we support Israel, we're pro-Israel, we love the Jews. Baruch Hashem, we love you, right? So the first is that we love, and any Christian that persecuted or hated Jews wasn't a real Christian. Now, of course, it's a little very strange claim, because in fact, all the Christians that persecuted Jews were very real Christians. Luther was a very real Christian, and they study Luther in Dallas Theological Seminary. They study him up and down. They study Calvin up and down. They study all these people, and they're highly regarded. And but anyways, but these people are generally pro-Israel. That's another conversation. But they realize also that Jewish people are very proud of their Jewish identity, and Jews don't want to stop being Jewish. And Jews feel, generally speaking, that by becoming a Christian, by converting to Christianity, you have severed your ties to your Jewish culture, your Jewish ancestry, your Jewish heritage. And Jews, even those who are not observant at all, those who are not religious in any way, who hold no affiliation of any kind, will still say, look, I'm a Jew, I'm very proud to be Jewish. And Jews perceive that by accepting Jesus that they are now Christians. They've changed religions. They have abandoned their Jewish faith. And that's where this approach has come in that has been devastatingly successful. And the approach is that when you become a believer in Jesus, you're not converting to another religion. Oh no. You are becoming a Messianic Jew. And the people who put this all together, these are the big names in the church. You're becoming a completed Jew, a fulfilled Jew. In fact, this is just one of many, and you can put it up there, but this is a training manual on how to share the Messiah with the Jew. This is put out by the Messianic Movement International. It literally trains evangelical Christians how to effectively witness to a Jewish person. And I mean, you have in the book all the verses that you need to memorize when you want to convert a Jew, things. Even it goes so far as things to avoid doing. In the book, it tells you, for example, avoid the next two questions if at all possible. Jesus being the Son of God in the Trinity, they're very difficult for Jewish people who haven't found the Messiah. They won't understand that. And so try to avoid that question and other questions. It has in it a whole avoid sections in here, things encouraging evangelicals what to say, what not to say. Some of this is very good advice you have here. This is good advice. Avoid anti-Semitic terms.
You think?
I'm kidding. No, it's right here. I just want to avoid anti-Semitic terms, such as Jewing down. That's not a good idea. If you're witnessing to a Jew, don't say to your next door neighbor, you're Jewing down. Kikes, also not a good idea.
Kikes, what is that?
Kikes, I knew what it was. I thought, all I knew as a kid was kike meant run. That means when they scream kike, it's a way of, it's a disparaging term for a Jew. It's a derivative of a German word. Christ killers. Try to avoid a term like Christ killer. Dirty Jew, Jew boy. Avoid jokes about the Jewish people, their money, etc. Some Jewish people are very sensitive about this. They may tell jokes about themselves, but it is offensive for another to do it. But the key point is this inside the staple to the inside of the training manual is a envelope, and in this envelope is really the most effective. This is the most effective piece of equipment to witness to a Jew effectively. And if you would, you could put that up on the screen. But this is called the Messianic Soul Winner's Card, the Messianic Soul Winner's Card. And it has two columns on it. One column says don't say, and the other column says do say. So it says here, when witnessing to a Jew, and this is based on Paul's teachings. Because Paul actually says in 1 Corinthians 9:20 and 21, he says, you have to be like a chameleon, and when you're witnessing, you have to be. I can become like anyone. That's what he says. To the Jew, I become as though I'm a Jew. So I come like a Jew, that I may gain the Jews of those who are not under the law, meaning the non-Jews. I become all things to all men, that I may gain some for Christ. I mean, so here you have that spelt out. In fact, this reference to how you're supposed to witness, they actually have, this is called indigenous missions. You can literally go to Moody Bible Institute in the Midwest, in Chicago, and they literally have, you can get a master's degree in Jewish evangelism, how to convert Jews. But you see at the top of it, they literally quotes here 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20. Become as a Jew to the Jews. So now this is going to become very familiar to you. So there are two columns on the card. The column on your right says don't say at the top, and the other column says do say. So don't, make sure that your message sounds a little Jewish. So don't say Jesus Christ. Apparently, I don't know why, Jesus Christ doesn't sound so Jewish. Who knew? Do say Messiah Yeshua. And incidentally, you will see many so-called messianic leaders when they speak to Jews, or they're speaking to messianic, they go Messiah Yeshua, Yeshua Messiah, Messiah Yeshua, all Jewish. But then you see them on the Christian TV programs that are completely, that there's no Jews watching. Then they go Jesus Christ openly. I mean, they modify the way they talk completely based on their audience. Completely. So don't say Jesus Christ. Do say Messiah Yeshua. That sounds Jewish. Don't say convert. Jews generally don't want to convert. Doesn't sound so Jewish to convert. You remember Ann Coulter a number of years ago on MSNBC? She was on, what's his name, Deutsch. She was doing that show. She said, no, you believe in Jesus, you become a completed Jew, a fulfilled Jew, a Messianic Jew. So it literally says here, don't say convert to Christianity, but do say become a Messianic Jew. I'm Messianic. Now, one of the interesting things, incidentally, is that you, of course, have so many machinations of Christianity that identify as Messianic. You have, for example, Jews for Jesus today, in our time today. But today they identify with Messianic Jews. In the old days, just so you know, the Jews for Jesus is a part of this whole movement, but they're really one end of the spectrum. In that there are many Christians who will say, I'm Messianic. They'll say it. They'll self-identify as Messianic, especially in front of Jews. Forget about it. But they really don't like if it gets too Jewish. That means this is a technique, it's a method to bring the Jews to Christ, to know their Savior, but ultimately we're not really that interested in the Messianic congregation. The Messianic shtick is just a pathway to get them to the cross, to get them to Calvary, to get them to to get them into a pew. That's where Jesus would lie in this spectrum. But the term messianic is very generic. It really would be the equivalent. It's not the equivalent, but it would be like Protestant. Are you Protestant? Well, yeah, but there's a wide range of Protestants. So there are Protestants who are Baptists or Southern Baptists, and then you have Protestants that believe in Reformed theology, who hold to Calvinism. There are charismatic Protestants, right? The Anglican Church, whose rites and practices and rituals are extremely close to the Roman Catholic Church. They also consider themselves Protestants. So the Messianic is a generic term. Today, no Jew who is converted to Christianity would be reluctant to use the word Messianic. In the old days, the Martin Rosen or Moshe Rosen types didn't even like using that word, and in fact, Rosen used to oppose the Messianic congregations because he recognized something that most people don't, and he was right, in that Jews who convert to Christianity generally do not wind up in Messianic congregations, they wind up in churches. And if you go to a Messianic congregation, there are some notable exceptions, but very few. The vast majority of the people that are there, when I say vast, I don't mean 55 or 65%, but 90% of the people who are in a Messianic congregation are not Jewish. If you want to find the Jews, you'll find them at Preston Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. They're packed with Jews. They've got more Jews than the Messianic congregations do. Jews for Jesus is a Baptist mission to the Jews. Baptist mission to the Jews. So therefore, there is no difference between what Jews for Jesus believes and what a Southern Baptist church believes, a mainstream Southern Baptist church believes. Right? There's no difference. If you take a Messianic congregation that's charismatic, there is no theological difference in terms of issues of salvation between what a Messianic congregation in Dallas or Houston believes and what an Assemblies of God church believes. There is none. The Assemblies of God is completely Christian Zionist, and the fact that the Messianics refuse to celebrate Christmas because they consider it, they won't do it because it doesn't look so Jewish, or whatever. As it turns out, many evangelical Christians know and understand that Christmas is pagan, and many of them refuse to celebrate Christmas. Puritans, they were forbidden to celebrate Christmas. So to Christians, there were no concessions made to the Messianic movement. The Messianic movement simply is the machination of Christianity, and therefore all the corresponding Protestant denominations that you find in the church that we're all familiar with have their corresponding expressions in the Messianic movement, because the Messianic movement is Christianity. But what it does is the Messianic movement, strangely, incorporates oral Torah and rabbinic traditions into its Christian beliefs, which typically churches don't. So therefore, you will have a church down the street and a Messianic congregation, and the only difference between the two congregations is that the Messianic congregation has adopted rabbinic traditions, has adopted oral Torah, and the church believes the exact same thing, everything. In fact, they'll have the Messianic leaders speak at the church all the time. They believe in the same thing, but they don't incorporate rabbinic traditions and Jewish liturgy. And here's the irony, because you pointed out the fact that the Messianic movement overwhelmingly opposes the oral Torah. And this is the strange part of the Messianic movement, is they are taught to, its followers and members are encouraged to not just looking at rabbinic literature and teachings as something that's not valuable, but look at it as disdain and as something of man, not of God. But actually, the only thing that distinguishes the Messianic movement from normative Christian churches is that Messianic congregations keep rabbinic traditions. They keep oral Torah, and churches don't. And that's the key point. So, for instance, in Messianic congregations, they like Sabbath candles. Well, Sabbath candles is a rabbinic tradition. You will not find it. It's a rabbinic commandment, and you will not find it anywhere in the Torah. Nowhere. But you know what? The same Messianics, they'll drive their car on Shabbos. Not a problem at all. They will eat. They'll cook lunch, dinner. They'll turn the oven on, turn the ignition on. All this, the Torah says openly, Lo yisavaru eish b'chol moishvei sechem. It's forbidden to kindle a fire. Turn on your car, you're igniting the gasoline, you're cooking, you're not allowed to cook on. They all do. Everybody knows they do. Now, what happened, there is something that I must state here. The Messianic movement got really lucky. And they got lucky because at the very same time, they were riding a wave in Christianity that is very popular today. And it's called, there are many names for it, but it's generally often referred to as post-Auschwitz theology. What does that mean? Well, after the Holocaust, obviously Christians had to reconcile the fact that, as it turns out in Germany, 65% of Germans were Lutherans. They were Christians in good standing with their churches. 55% of the members of the SS were members of the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, Christians realized that it was only Christian countries that persecuted Jews and murdered them. And then, in fact, I'm here in Indonesia where Jews were safe. If a Jew was able to make it to Indonesia, they were okay. If a Jew was able to make it to Shanghai, they were safe. No one in Shanghai would harm them. And in fact, there was an ambassador that made sure that a Japanese ambassador that saved many thousands of Jewish lives. Jews went to Japan. The yeshiva I attended, the Mir Yeshiva, that rabbinical school was saved because the Japanese, who were allies of the Nazis, that means allowed Jews to reside there during the war, to the chagrin of the Germans, because remember, they were part of the Axis. But the Japanese were not Christians. They believed in Taoism or some version of Buddhism or emperor worship. So they didn't know what anti-Semitism was because they hadn't been affected by the belief of Yeshua. They didn't know about Yeshua, so they saved Jews. And everyone who knew about Yeshua in Europe murdered Jews. This is the startling point. So Christians had to come to terms with this very uncomfortable reality. And as much as they want to dismiss saying, oh, they weren't real Christians, not real, it's nonsense. They knew that it was the whole Christian world participated in this. And therefore, the church realized that a change had to be made. And this change, when I say the church, I mean all across the board, except maybe for the Eastern Church, with the exception of the Eastern Orthodox churches. And that is that the reason how this happened was because the Jewish origins of the Christian faith was not emphasized in churches, whether it was Protestant or Catholic. If you attend any university today, any Christian university, or even a secular university and have a Christian teaching class in New Testament, the first day, within 15 minutes of the class, the professor will say, you cannot understand Jesus unless you understand the Jewish world that he emerged from. Anywhere, I don't care where you go. Now, this was not the case 200 years ago. And therefore, what happened after the Holocaust, when churches began to think about, okay, something went terribly wrong, is they began to incorporate. It became within mainstream Christianity. It became a new approach to say that you have to understand Jesus within a Jewish crucible. It had nothing to do with evangelizing Jews. This was an introspective approach that the church took. And therefore, when the Messianic movement was concocted, when it was created, as the movement we know today was created in the early 1970s. When it was created, they were riding that way because it was already very, very in vogue among evangelical Christians to do things more Jewish, to emphasize Yeshua. So that was already in play and they really lucked out. Now, to the Jewish community, this was a horror, because now they're presenting themselves as Jewish. But, oh my God, this was a real disaster. What they did essentially was they blurred the distinctions between Judaism and Christianity in order to lure Jews who would otherwise resist the straightforward Christian message, using this kind of material that I've been showing and so on. Now, what happened was what no one expected. Isaiah says, Utsu Eitza V'sufa, they will come up with a plan and it will come to naught. Dabru Dava, they will speak. V'lo Yokum, it will not be established. Ki Imanu Kael, because the God of Israel is with us. And what happened was something the strangest thing. The Messianic congregations became a lightning rod for Gentiles, not for Jews. Now, it doesn't mean there were no Jews. There were some Jews who joined it and led these congregations, of course. And the leaders tend to have Jewish ancestry. But the congregations were filled with who? With Christians. Who were these Christians flocking to Messianic congregations? Who are they? These were people in the churches who have been told in their churches that it's Jewish. It's a good thing to believe that Jesus was a Jew, and it's all Jewish. And bless Israel, and the more Jewish, the better, and the more Hebrew, it's fantastic. So they're going fantastic. They're looking at the Messianic movement. They're going, this is great. The Messianic movement was never designed for them. It wasn't designed for non-Jews. It was designed to convert Jews. Some Jews were affected by it, but the vast bulk of people moved by the Messianic movement were non-Jews who loved it because they can keep their Jesus, but they can have Judaism with it. They can mix it all together. They have Hebrew and they have reading Hebrew. We don't have it in our churches. What happened the next is what no one predicted. This is the shocker of all. And that is, although the Messianic congregation was designed to convert Jews to Christianity using this approach, it actually had the opposite effect. It strengthened the Jewish community in a very powerful way because they realized that this was a very serious problem. They had to take Jewish education more seriously. And one of the other things that happened was that Gentiles in these churches, in these Messianic churches, began to go, wait, we're studying Jewish things, we're studying more Torah, we're beginning to learn a little bit of Hebrew, we're going to Israel. We maybe, let's learn from a rabbi, let's read a book written by a great sage, let's study Jewish things. They go, whoa, the Messianic movement is totally Christian. I don't believe in Jesus anymore. If you speak to any rabbi today doing conversions, they will tell you that the vast bulk of their converts who are converting to Judaism have been through the Messianic movement. The Messianic movement has become a conduit, because God had another plan. It has become a conduit for people in the churches who have the Jewish soul. That's what drew them to the Messianic movement. They were sniffing the wrong thing. That means they were sniffing in the Messianic movement because they wanted their Jesus. But what happened was, it was the Jewish thing they really, really craved, that they cherished, that they loved. That's what they wanted. And they couldn't get enough of it in the Messianic movement, because in the Messianic movement, it's the drug. They wanted, give us the real thing. And now the Messianic movement has become the largest conduit for non-Jews who Christian Zionists to embrace the Jewish faith. And it's Jews for Jesus hates it for that reason. They can't stand it. I know it seems strange to you, but this is what Rosen really predicted. Rosen was very afraid that the Messianic movement, I think, by incorporating too much Jewish ideas, would in fact become a place that would make Christians become Jewish. That's what in fact has occurred. The Messianic movement today is the great contributor, sort of the pathway for non-Jews to convert to Judaism, and sort of a stopping place along the way. It's shocking.
אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. ישראל, הנתונים בצרה